Agatha Christie was an English detective novelist and playwright. She wrote about 75 novels and 66 detectives and 14 short stories. She is also a famous mystery writer. Her other famous books are Murder on the Orient Express and The ABC Murders. Her novels have sold more than 100 million copies and that are translated into some 100 languages. Many works have been adapted for television and films. The Murder on the Links, novel written by Agatha Christie, Part 2, Chapter 11, Jack Reynolds. What the next development of the conversation would have been, I cannot say. For that moment, the door was thrown open violently and a tall young man strode into the room. Just for a moment, I had the uncanny sensation that the dead man had come to life again. Then I realized that this dark head was untouched with grey, and that, in point of fact, it was a mere boy who now burst in among us with so little ceremony. He went straight to Mrs. Reynolds with an impetuosity and took no heed of the presence of others. "Mother, Jack!" With a cry, she folded him in her arms. "My dearest, but what brings you here? You were to sail on the Ansora from Cherbourg 2 days ago." Then suddenly recalling to herself the presence of others, she turned with a certain dignity. "My son." "Monsieur." "Oh," said M. Hortet, acknowledging the young man's bow. "So you did not sail on the Ansora?" "No, monsieur." As I was about to explain, the Ansora was detained 24 hours through engine trouble. I should have sailed last night instead of the night before, but happening to buy an evening paper, I saw in it an account of the awful tragedy that had befallen us. His voice broke and the tear came into his eyes. "My poor father, my poor father." Staring at him like one in a dream, Mrs. Reynolds repeated, "So you did not sail?" And then, with a gesture of infinite weariness, she murmured as though to herself, "After all, it does not matter now. Sit down, Monsieur Reynolds, I beg of you," said M. Hortet, indicating a chair. "My sympathy for you is profound. It must have been a terrible shock to you to learn the news as you did. However, it is most fortunate that you were prevented from sailing. I am in hope that you may be able to give us just the information we need to clear up this mystery. I am at your disposal, monsieur. Ask me any question you please. To begin with, I understand that this journey was being undertaken at your father's request." "Quite so, monsieur. I received a telegram bidding me to proceed without delay to Buenos Aires, and from thence via the Andes to Valparaiso, and so to Santiago." "Ah, and the object of this journey?" "I have no idea." "What?" "No. See, here is the telegram." The magistrate took it and read aloud. "Proceed immediately. Cherbourg, embark Ansora, sailing tonight, Buenos Aires. Ultimate destination Santiago. Further instructions will wait you, Buenos Aires. Do not fail. Matter is of utmost importance, Reynolds." And there had been no previous correspondence on the matter. Jack Reynolds shook his head. "That is the only intimation of any kind. I know, of course, that my father, having lived so long out there, had necessary many interests in South America, but he had never mooted any suggestion of sending me out. You have, of course, been a good deal in South America, M. Reynolds?" "I was there as a child, but I was educated in England and spent most of my holidays in that country, so I really know far less of South America than might be supposed. You see, the war broke out. Then I was 17. You served in the English Flying Corps, did you not? Yes, monsieur. M. Hortet nodded his head and proceeded with his enquiries along the by now well-known lines. In response, Jack Reynolds declared definitely that he knew nothing of any enmity his father might have incurred in the city of Santiago or elsewhere in the South American continent, that he had noticed no change in his father's manner of late, and that he had never heard him refer to a secret. He had regarded the mission to South America as connected with business interests. As M. Hortet paused for a minute, the quiet voice of Gerard broke in. I should like to put a few questions of my own, Monsieur Lejeune. By all means, Monsieur Gerard, if you wish, said the magistrate coldly. Gerard edged his chair a little nearer to the table. Were you on good terms with your father, Monsieur Reynolds? Certainly I was, returned a lad haughtily. You assert that positivity? Yes. No little dispute, eh? Jack shrugged his shoulders. Everyone may have a difference of opinion now and then. Quite so, quite so. But if anyone were to assert that you had a violent quarrel with your father on the eve of your departure for Paris, that person, without doubt, would be lying. I could not but admire the ingenuity of Gerard, his boast. I know everything had been no idle one. Jack Reynolds was clearly disconcerted by the question. We did have an argument, he admitted. An argument. In the course of that argument, did you use this phrase? When you are dead, I can do as I please. I may have done, muttered the other. I don't know. In response to that, did your father say, but I am not dead yet? To which you responded, I wish you were. The boy made no answer. His hands fiddled nervously with the things on the table in front of him. I must request an answer, please, Monsieur Reynolds, said Gerard sharply. With an angry exclamation, the boy swept a wavy paper knife to the floor. What does it matter? You might as well know. Yes, I did quarrel with my father. I dare say I said all those things. I was so angry, I cannot even remember what I said. I was furious. I could almost have killed him at that moment. There, make the most of that. He leant back in his chair, flushed and defiant. Gerard smiled, then moving his chair back a little said, that is all. You would, without doubt, prefer to continue the interrogatory, Monsieur Hortet? Yes, exactly, said M. Hortet. And what was the subject of your quarrel? That I decline to state. M. Hortet sat up in his chair. Monsieur Reynolds, it is not permitted to trifle with the law, he thundered. What was the subject of the quarrel? Young Reynolds remained silent, his boyish face sullen and overcast. But another voice spoken, imperturbable and calm, the voice of Hercule Poirot. I will inform you, if you like, monsieur. You know? Certainly, I know. The subject of the quarrel was Mademoiselle Marthe de Brioul. Reynolds sprang round, startled the magistrate, leaned forward. Is that so, monsieur? Jack Reynolds bowed his head. Yes, he admitted. I love Mademoiselle de Brioul, and I wish to marry her. When I informed my father of the fact, he flew at once into a violent rage. Naturally, I could not stand hearing the girl I loved insulted, and I, too, lost my temper. Horton looked across at Mrs. Ronald. You were aware of this attachment, Madame? I feared it, she replied simply. Mother, cried the boy, you too. Martha is as good as she is beautiful. What can you have against her? I have nothing against Mademoiselle de Briolle in any way, but I should prefer you to marry an English woman, or if a French woman, not one who has a mother of doubtful antecedents. Her rancor against the older woman showed plainly in her voice, and I could well understand that it must have been a bitter blow to her when her only son showed sign of falling in love with the daughter of her rival. Mrs. Renault continued, addressing the magistrate. I ought perhaps to have spoken to my husband on the subject, but I hoped that it was only a boy and girl flirtation which would blow over all the quicker if no notice was taken of it. I blame myself now for my silence. But my husband, as I told you, had seemed so anxious and careworn, different altogether from his normal self, that I was chiefly concerned not to give him any additional worry. M. Horton nodded. When you confirmed your father of your intention towards Mademoiselle de Briolle, he resumed. He was surprised. He seemed completely taken aback. Then he ordered me peremptorily to dismiss any such idea from my mind. He would never give his consent to such a marriage. Nettled, I demanded what he said against Mademoiselle de Briolle. To that he could give no satisfactory reply, but spoke in slighting terms of the mystery surrounding the lives of the mother and daughter. I answered that I was marrying Martha and not her antecedents, but he shouted me down with a peremptory refusal to discuss the matter in any way. The whole thing must be given up. The injustice and high-handedness of it all maddened me, especially since he himself always seemed to go out of his way to be attentive to the de Briolle, and was always suggesting that they should be asked to the house. I lost my head, and we quarrelled in earnest. My father reminded me that I was entirely dependent on him, and it must have been in answer to that I made the remark about doing I pleased after his death. Poirot interrupted with a quick question. You were aware then of the terms of your father's will? I know that he had left half of his fortune to me, the other half in trust for my mother to come to me at her death, replied the lad. Proceed with your story, said the magistrate. After that, we shouted at each other in sheer rage until I suddenly realized that I was in danger of missing my train to Paris. I had to run for the station, still in a white heat of fury. However, once well away, I calmed down. I wrote to Martha, telling her what had happened, and her reply soothed me still further. She pointed out to me that we had only to be steadfast, and any opposition was bound to give way at last. Our affection for each other must be tried and proved. And when my parents realized that it was no light infatuation on my part, they would doubtless relent towards us. Of course, to her, I had not dwelt on my father's principal objection to the match. I soon saw that I should do my cause no good by violence. To pass to another matter, are you acquainted with the name of Douvian? Monsieur Renaud Douvian, said Jack. Douvian? He leaned forward and slowly picked up the paper knife he had swept from the table. As he lifted his head, his eyes met the watching one of Gerard. Douvian? No, I can't say I do. Will you read this letter, Monsieur Renaud, and tell me if you have any idea as to who the person was who addressed it to your father? Jack Renaud took the letter and read it through, the color mounting his face as he said so. Addressed to my father? The emotion and indignation in his tone were evident. Yes, we found it in the pocket of his coat. Does he hesitated, throwing the merest fraction of the glance towards his mother. The magistrate understood. As yet, no. Can you give us any clue as to the writer? I have no idea whatsoever. M. Houghton sighed. A most mysterious case. Oh, well, I suppose we can now rule out the letter altogether. Let me see. Where were we? Oh, the weapon. I fear this may give you pain, Monsieur Renaud. I understand it was a present from you to your mother. Very sad, very distressing. Jack Renaud leaned forward, his face, which had flushed during the perusal of the letter, was now deadly right. Do you mean that was with an aeroplane wire paper cutter that my father was killed? But it is impossible. A little thing like that. Alas, Monsieur Renaud, it is only too true. An idle little tool, I fear, sharp and easy to handle. Where is it? Can I see it? Is it still in the body? Oh no, it has been removed. You would like to see it to make sure. It would be as well, perhaps, though Madame has already identified it. Still, Monsieur Bex, might I trouble you? Certainly, I will fetch it immediately. Would it not be better to take Monsieur Renaud to the shed? Suggested Gerard smoothly. Without a doubt, he would wish to see his father's body. The boy made a shivering gesture of negation, and the magistrate, always disposed to cross Gerard whenever possible, replied, But no, not at present. Monsieur Bex will be so kind as to bring it to us here. The commissary left the room. Stoner crossed to Jack and wrung him by his hand. Poirot had risen and was adjusting a pair of candlesticks that struck his trained eye as being a shade as new. The magistrate was reading the mysterious law letter through a last time, clinging desperately to his first theory of jealousy and a stab in the back. Suddenly the door burst open and the commissary rushed in. Monsieur Lejeune. Monsieur Lejeune. But yes, what is it? The dagger. It is gone. What gone? Vanished, disappeared. The glass jar that contained it is empty. What? I cried. Impossible. Why? Only this morning I saw. The words died on my tongue. But the attention of the entire room was diverted to me. What is that you say? Cried to commissary. This morning. I saw it there this morning. I saw slowly. About an hour and a half ago, to be accurate. You went to the shed then? How did you get the key? I asked the sergeant de Ville for it. And you went there? Why? I hesitated, but in the end I decided that the only thing to do was to make a clear breast of it. Monsieur Hortet, I said, I have committed a grave fault, for which I must crave your indulgence. Proceed, Monsieur. The fact of the matter is, I said, wishing myself anywhere else, but there I was, that I met a young lady, an acquaintance of mine. She displayed a great desire to see everything that was to be seen, and in short, I took the key to show her the body. Ah, cried the magistrate indignantly, but it is a grave fault you have committed there, Captain Hastings. It is altogether most irregular. You should not have permitted yourself this folly. I know, I said meekly. Nothing that you can say could be too severe, Monsieur. You did not invite this lady to come here? Certainly not. I met her quite by accident. She is an English lady who happens to be staying in Merlinville, though I was not aware of that until my unexpected meeting with her. Well, well, said the magistrate, softening. It was most irregular, but the lady is without doubt young and beautiful. What is it to be young and be sighed sentimentally? But the commissary, less romantic and more practical, took up the tale. But did you not reclose and lock the door when you departed? That is just it, I said slowly. That is what I blame myself for so terribly. My friend was upset at the sight. She nearly fainted. I got her some brandy and water, and afterwards insisted on accompanying her back to the town. In the excitement, I forgot to relock the door. I only did so when I got back to the villa. Then for 20 minutes late, said the commissary slowly. He stopped. Exactly, I said. 20 minutes, mused the commissary. It is deplorable, said M. Hortet, his sternness of manner returning without precedent. Suddenly another voice spoke. You find it deplorable? Asked Gerard. Certainly I do. I find it admirable, said the other imperturbable. This unexpected allay quite bewildered me. Admirable, Monsieur Gerard? Asked the magistrate, studying him cautiously out of the corner of his eye. Precisely, and why? Because we know now that the assassin, or an accomplice of the assassin, has been near the villa only an hour ago. It will be strange if, with that knowledge, we do not shortly lay hand upon him. There was a note of menace in his voice. He continued. He risked a good deal to gain possession of that dagger. Perhaps he feared that fingerprint might be discovered on it. Poirot turned to Bugs. You said there were none. Gerard shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps he could not be sure. Poirot looked at him. You are wrong, Monsieur Gerard. The assassin wore gloves, so he must have been sure. I do not say it was the assassin himself. It may have been an accomplice who was not aware of that fact. The magistrate's clerk was gathering up the papers on the table. M. Hortet addressed us. Our work here is finished. Perhaps, Monsieur Renaud, you will listen while your evidence is read over to you. I have purposely kept all the proceedings as informal as possible. I have been called original in my methods, but I maintain that there is much to be said for originality. The case is now in the clever hands of the renowned Monsieur Gerard. He will without doubt distinguish himself. Indeed, I wonder that he has not already laid his hands upon the murderers. Madam, again let me assure you of my heartfelt sympathy. Messieurs, I wish you all good day. And accompanied by his clerk and the commissary, he took his departure. Poirot tugged out that large turnip of a watch of his and observed the time. Let us return to the hotel for lunch, my friend, he said, and you shall recount to me in full the indiscretion of this morning. No one is observing us. We need make no adieus. We went quietly out of the room. The examining magistrate had just driven off in his car. I was going down the steps when Poirot's voice arrested me. One little moment, my friend. Dexterously, he whipped out his yard measures and proceeded quite solemnly to measure an overcoat hanging in the hall from the collar to the hem. I had not seen it hanging there before and guessed that it belonged to either Mr. Stoner or Jack Reynolds. Then, with a little satisfied grunt, Poirot returned the measure to his pocket and followed me out into the open air. Chapter 12. Poirot elucidates certain points. Why did you measure that overcoat? I asked with some curiosity as we walked down the hot white road at a leisurely pace. Parbleu, to see how long it was, replied my friend imperturbably. I was vexed. Poirot's incurable habit of making a mystery out of nothing never failed to irritate me. I relapsed into silence and followed a train of thought of my own, although I had not noticed them specially at the time. Certain words Mrs. Reynolds had addressed to her son now recurred to me, fraught with a new significance. So you did not sail, she had said, and then had added, after all, it does not matter now. What had she meant by that? The words were enigmatical, significant. Was it possible that she knew more than we supposed? She had denied all knowledge of the mysterious mission with which her husband was to have entrusted his son. But was she really less ignorant than she pretended? Could she enlighten us if she chose? And was her silence part of a carefully thought out and preconceived plan? The more I thought about it, the more I was convinced that I was right. Mrs. Reynolds knew more than she chose to tell. In her surprise at seeing her son, she had momentarily betrayed herself. I felt convinced that she knew, if not the assassins, at least the motive of the assassination. But some very powerful consideration must keep her silent. You think profoundly, my friend, remarked Poirot, breaking in on my reflections. What is it that intrigues you so? I told him, sure of my ground, though feeling expectant that he could ridicule my suspicions. But to my surprise, he nodded thoughtfully. You are quite right, Hastings. From the beginning, I have been sure that she was keeping something back. At first I suspected her, if not of inspiring, at least of convincing at the crime. You suspected her? I cried. But certainly she benefits enormously. In fact, by this new will, she is the only person to benefit. So, from the start, she was signaled out for attention. You may have been noticed that I took an early opportunity of examining her wrists. I wished to see whether there was any possibility that she had gagged and bound herself. Abian. I saw at once that there was no fake. The cords had actually been drawn too tight as to cut into the flesh. That ruled out the possibility of her having committed the crime single-handed, but it was still possible for her to have connived at it, or to have been the instigator with an accomplice. Moreover, the story, as she told it, was singularly familiar to me. The masked man that she could not recognize. The mention of the secret. I had heard or read all these things before. Another little detail confirmed my belief that she was not speaking the truth. The wristwatch. Hastings. The wristwatch. Again that wristwatch. Poirot was eyeing me curiously. To see, mon ami, you comprehend? No, I replied with some ill humor. I neither see nor comprehend. You make all these confounded mysteries, and it's useless asking you to explain. You always like keeping something up your sleeve to the last minute. Do not enrage yourself, my friend, said Poirot with a smile. I will explain if you wish, but not a word to Gerard. Est endo. He treats me as an old one of no importance. We shall see. In common fairness, I gave him a hint. If he does not choose to act upon it, that is his own lookout. I assured Poirot that he could rely upon my discretion. See it, bien. Let us then employ our little grey cells. Tell me, my friend, at that time, according to you, did the tragedy take place? Why, at 2 o'clock or thereabout, I said, astonished. You remember, Mrs. Renault told us that she heard the clock strike while the men were in the room. Exactly, and on the strength of that, you, the examining magistrate, begs, and everyone else, except the time without further question. But I, Hercule Poirot, say that Madame Renaud lied. The crime took place at least 2 hours earlier, but the doctors, they declared after examination of the body that death had taken place between 10 and 7 hours previously. Mon ami, for some reason it was imperative that the crime should seem to have taken place later than it actually did. You have read of a smashed watch or clock recording the exact hour of a crime, so that the time should not rest on Madame Renaud's testimony alone. Someone moved on the hand of the wristwatch, the 2 o'clock, and then dashed it violently to the ground. But as is often the case, they defeated their own object. The glass was smashed, but the mechanism of the watch was uninjured. It was a most disastrous maneuver on their part, for it at once drew my attention to 2 points. First, that Madame Renaud was lying. Secondly, that there must be some vital reason for the postponement of the time. But what reason could there be? That is a question. There have been old mystery. As yet, I cannot explain it. There is only one idea that presents itself to me as having a possible connection, and that is, the last train left Merlinville at 17 minutes past 12. I followed it out slowly, so that the crime apparently taking place some 2 hours later, anyone leaving by that train would have an impeccable alibi. Perfect, Hastings, you have it. I sprang up. But we must inquire at the station, surely. They cannot have failed to notice 2 foreigners who left by the train. We must go there at once. You think so, Hastings? Of course. Let us go there now. Poirot restrained my ardor with a light touch upon the arm. Go by all means if you wish, mon ami. But if you go, I should not ask for particulars of 2 foreigners. I stared, and he said rather impatiently, you do not believe all that rigmarole, do you? The masked man and all the rest of city history la. His words took me so much aback that I hardly knew how to respond. He went on serenely. You heard me say to Gerard, did you not, that all the details of this crime were familiar to me? A beard that presupposes one of 2 things. Either the brain that planned the first crime also planned this one, or else an account read of a cause celebre unconsciously remained in our assassin's memory and prompted the details. I shall be able to pronounce definitely on that after he broke off. I was revolving sundry matters in my mind, but Mr. Reynolds' letter, it distinctly mentioned a secret and Santiago. Undoubtedly, there was a secret in Monsieur Reynolds' life. There can be no doubt of that. On the other hand, the word Santiago, to my mind, is a red herring dragged continuously across the track to put us off the scent. It is possible that it was used in the same way on Monsieur Reynolds to keep him from directing his suspicions to a quarter nearer at hand. Oh, be assured, Hastings, the danger that threatened him was not in Santiago, it was near at hand in France. He spoke so gravely and with such assurance that I could not fail to be convinced, but I essayed one final objection. And the match and cigarette, and found near to the body. What of them? A light of pure enjoyment lit up Poirot's face. Planned, deliberately planned, therefore Gerard or one of his tribe to find. He is smart, Gerard. He can do his tricks. So can a good retriever dog. He comes in so pleased with himself. For hours he was crawled on his stomach. See what I have found, he says, and then again to me. What do you see here? Me, I answer with profound and deep truth. Nothing. And Gerard, the great Gerard, he laughs. He thinks to himself, oh, he is imbecile, this old one, but we shall see. But my mind had reverted to the main facts. Then all the story of the masked man is false. What really happened? Poirot shrugged his shoulders. One person could tell us, Madame Reynolds, but she will not speak. Treats and entreaties would not move her. A remarkable woman, that Hastings. I recognized as soon as I saw her that I had to deal with a woman of unusual character. At first, As I told you, I was inclined to suspect her of being concerned in the crime. Afterwards, I altered my opinion. What made you do that? Her spontaneous and genuine grief at the sight of her husband's body. I could swear that the agony in the cry of her was genuine. Yes, I said thoughtfully. One cannot mistake these things. I beg your pardon, my friend. One can always be mistaken. Regard a great actress. Does not her acting of grief carry you, weigh and impress you with its reality? No, however strong men, on impression and belief. I needed other evidence before I allowed myself to be satisfied. The great criminal can be a great actor. I base my certainty in this case not upon my own impression, but upon the undeniable fact that Madame Renaud actually fainted. I turned up her eyelid and felt her pulse. There was no deception. The swoon was genuine. Therefore, I was satisfied that her anguish was real and not assumed. Beside a small additional point without interest, it was unnecessary for Madame Renaud to exhibit unrestrained grief. She had had one paroxysm on learning of her husband's death, and there would be no need for her to simulate another such a violent one on beholding his body. No, Madame Renaud was not her husband's murderess. But why has she lied? She lied about the wristwatch. She lied about the masked man. She lied about a third thing. Tell me, Hastings, what is your explanation of the open door? Well, I said, rather embarrassed. I suppose it was an oversight. They forgot to shut it. Poirot shook his head and sighed. That is the explanation of Gerard. It does not satisfy me. There is a meaning behind that open door which for the moment I cannot fathom. One thing I am fairly sure of. They did not leave through the door. They left by the window. What? Precisely. But there were no footmarks in the flower bed underneath. No. And there ought to have been. Listen, Hastings. The gardener, Auguste, as you heard him say, planted both these beds the preceding afternoon. In the one there are plentiful impressions of his big hobnailed boots. In the other none. You see, someone had passed that way. Someone who, to obliterate their footprints, smoothed over the surface of the bed with a rake. Where did they get a rake? Where they got the spade and the gardening clothes, said Poirot impatiently. There is no difficulty about that. What make you think that they left that way, though? Surely it is more probable that they entered by the window and left by the door. That is possible, of course. Yet I have a strong idea that they left by the window. I think you are wrong, perhaps, mon ami. I mused, thinking over the new field of conjecture that Poirot's deductions had opened up to me. I recalled my wonder at his cryptic allusion to the flower bed and the wristwatch. His remarks had seemed so meaningless at the moment, and now, for the first time, I realized how remarkably, from a few slight incidents, he had unravelled much of the mystery that surrounded the case. I paid a belated homage to my friend. In the meantime, I said, considering, although we know a great deal more than we did, we are no nearer to solving the mystery of the killing Mr. Renaud. No, said Poirot cheerfully. In fact, we are a great deal farther off. The fact seemed to afford him such peculiar satisfaction that I gazed at him in wonder. He met my eye and smiled. Suddenly a light burst upon me. Poirot, Mrs. Reynolds, I see it now. She must be shielding somebody. From the quickness with which Poirot received my remark, I could see that the idea had already occurred to him. Yes, he said thoughtfully, shielding someone or screening someone. One of the two. Then, as we entered our hotel, he enjoined silence on me with a gesture. Chapter 13. The Girl with the Anxious Eyes. We lunched with an excellent appetite. For a while we ate in silence, and then Poirot observed maliciously, "Bien, and your indiscretions, you recount them not." I felt myself blushing. "Oh, you mean this morning?" I endeavoured to adopt a tone of absolute nonchalance. But I was no match for Poirot. In a very few minutes he had extracted the whole story from me, his eyes tingling as he did so. Tiens, a story of the most romantic. What is her name? This charming young lady? I had to confess that I did not know. Still more romantic. The first rencontre in the train from Paris. The second here. Journeys end in lovers' meetings. Is not that the saying? Don't be an ass, Poirot. Yesterday it was Mademoiselle Dubriol. Today it is Mademoiselle Cinderella. Decidedly, you have the heart of a Turk, Hastings. You should establish a harem. It is all very well to rag me. Mademoiselle Dubriol is a very beautiful girl, and I do admire her immensely. I don't mind admitting it. The others, nothing. I don't suppose I shall ever see her again. You do not propose to see the lady again? His last words were almost a question, and I was aware of the sharpness with which he darted a glance at me, and before my eyes, writ large in letters of fire, I saw the words Hotel du Fair, and I heard again her voice saying, "Come and look at me," and my own answering with embarrassment, "I will." I answered Poirot lightly enough. She asked me to look her up, but of course I shan't. Why, of course? Well, I don't want to. Mademoiselle Cinderella is staying at the hotel's Angleterre. You told me, did you not? No, Hotel du Fair. True, I forgot. A moment's misgiving shot across my mind. Surely I had never mentioned any hotel too. Poirot. I looked across at him and felt reassured. He was cutting his bread into neat little squares, completely absorbed in his task. He must have fancied I had told him where the girl was staying. We had coffee outside facing the sea. Poirot smoked one of his tiny cigarettes and then drew his watch from his pocket. The train to Paris leave 2:25, he observed. I should be starting. Paris? I cried. That is what I said, mon ami. You are going to Paris. But why? He replied very seriously. To look for the murderer of Monsieur Renault. You think he is in Paris? I am quite certain that he is not. Nevertheless, it is there that I must look for him. You do not understand, but I will explain it all to you in good time. Believe me, this journey to Paris is necessary. I shall not be away long in all probability. I shall return tomorrow. I do not propose that you should accompany me. Remain here and keep an eye on Gerard. Also, cultivate the society of Monsieur Reynolds Fields. That reminds me, I said, I mean to ask you how you know about those two. Mon ami, I know human nature. Throw together a boy like young Reynolds had a beautiful girl like Mademoiselle Marthe, and the result is almost inevitable. Then the quarrel. It was money or a woman. And remembering Leonie's description of the lad's anger, I decided on the latter. So I made my guess, and I was right. You already suspected that she loved young Reynolds? Poirot smiled. At any rate, I saw that she had anxious eyes. That is how I always think of Mademoiselle de Briolle, asked the girl with the anxious eyes. His voice was so grave that it impressed me uncomfortably. What do you mean by that, Poirot? I fancy, my friend, that we shall see before very long, but I must start. I will come and see you off, I said, rising. You will do nothing of the sort. I forbid it. He was so peremptorily that I stared at him in surprise. He nodded emphatically. I mean it, mon ami. You revere. I felt rather at a close, and after Poirot had left me, I strolled down to the beach and watched the bathers without feeling energetic enough to join them. I rather fancied that Cinderella might be disporting herself among with them in some wonderful costume, but I saw no sign of her. I strolled aimlessly along the sands towards the further end of the town. It occurred to me that, after all, it would only be decent feeling on my part to inquire after the girl, and it would save trouble in the end. The matters would then be finished with. There would be no need for me to trouble about her any further. But if I did not go at all, she might quite possibly come and look me up at the villa. Accordingly, I left the beach and walked inland. I soon found the Hotel du Phare, a very unpretentious building. It was annoying in the extreme not to know the lady's name, and to save my dignity, I decided to stroll inside and look around. Probably I should find her in the lounge. I went in, but there was no sign of her. I waited for some time, till my impatience got the better of me. I took the concierge aside and slipped 5 francs into his hand. I wish to see a lady who is staying here, a young English lady, small and dark. I am not sure of her name. The man shook his head and seemed to be suppressing a grin. There is no such lady as you described staying here. But the lady told me she was staying here. Monsieur must have made a mistake, or it is more likely the lady did, since there has been another gentleman here enquiring for her. What is that you say? I cried, surprised. But yes, monsieur, a gentleman who described her just as you have done. What was he like? He was a small gentleman, well dressed, very neat, very spotless, the moustache very stiff, the head of a peculiar shape, and the eyes green. Poirot saw that was why he refused to let me accompany him to the station. The impertinence of it! I would thank him not to meddle in my concerns. Did the fancy I needed a nurse to look after me? Thanking the man, I departed, somewhat at a loss, and still much incensed with my meddlesome friend. But where was the lady? I set aside my breath and tried to puzzle it out. Eventually, through inadvertence, she had named the wrong hotel. Then another thought struck me. Was it inadvertence, or had she deliberately withheld her name and given me the wrong address? The more I thought about it, the more I felt convinced that this last surmise of mine was right. For some reason or other, she did not wish to let the acquaintances ripen into friendship, and though half an hour earlier this had been precisely my own view, I did not enjoy having the tables turned upon me. The whole affair was profoundly unsatisfactory, and I went up to the Villa Geneve in a condition of distinct ill humor. I did not go to the house, but went up the path to the little bench by the shed and sat there moodily enough. I was distracted from my thoughts by the sound of voices close at hand. In a second or two, I realized that they came not from the garden I was in, but from the adjoining garden of the Villa Margheriti, and that they were approaching rapidly. A girl's voice was speaking, a voice that I recognized as that of the beautiful Marthe. "Cherry," she was saying, "it is really true. Are all our troubles over?" "You know it, Marthe," Jack Reynolds replied. "Nothing can part us now, beloved. The last obstacle to our union is removed. Nothing can take you from me." "Nothing?" the girl murmured. "Oh, Jack, Jack, I am afraid." I had moved to depart, realizing that I was quite unintentionally eavesdropping. As I rose to my feet, I caught sight of them through a gap in the hedge. They stood together facing me, the man's arm round the girl, his eyes looking into hers. They were a splendid-looking couple, the dark, well-knit boy and the fair young goddesses. They seemed made for each other as they stood there, happy in spite of terrible tragedy that overshadowed their young lives. But the girl's face was troubled, and Jack Reynolds seems to recognize it as he held her closer to him and asked, "But what are you afraid of, darling? What is there to fear now?" And then I saw the look in her eyes, the look Poirot had spoken of, as she murmured, so that I almost guessed at the words, "I am afraid for you." I did not hear young Reynolds' answer, for my attention was distracted by an unusual appearance a little further down the hedge. There appeared to be a brown bush there, which seemed odd to see the least of it. So early in the summer, I stepped along in to investigate, but my advance, the brown bush withdrew itself, reciprocated, and faced me with a finger on its lips. It was Gerard. Enjoining cautious, I had the way round the shed until we were out of earshot. "What were you doing there?" I asked. "Exactly what you were doing, listening." "But I was not there on purpose." "Ah," said Gerard, "I was." "As always," I admitted the man while disliking him. He looked me up and down with a sort of contemptuous disfavor. "You didn't help matters by butting in. I might have heard something useful in a minute. What have you done with your old fossil?" "Monsieur Poirot has gone to Paris," I replied coldly. Gerard snapped his fingers disdainfully. "So he has gone to Paris, has he? Well, a good thing. The longer he stays there, the better. But what does he think he will find there? I thought. I read in the question a tinge of uneasiness. I drew myself up. That I am not at liberty to say, I said quietly. Gerard subjected me to a piercing stare. He has probably enough sense not to tell you, he remarked rudely. Good afternoon, I am busy. And with that he turned on his heel and left me without ceremony. Matters seemed at a standstill. At the Villa Geneve, Gerard evidently did not desire my company, and from what I had seen, it seemed fairly certain that Jack Reynolds did not either. I went back to the town, had an enjoyable bath, and returned to the hotel. I turned in early, wondering whether the following day would bring forth anything in instance or interest. I was fully unprepared for that it did bring forth. I was eating my petit dejeuner in the dining room when the waiter, who had been talking to someone outside, came back in obvious excitement. He hesitated for a minute, fidgeting with his napkin, and then burst out, Monsieur will pardon me, but he is connected, is he not, with the affair at the Villa Geneve? Yes, I said eagerly. Why, Monsieur has not heard the news though. What news? That there has been another murder here last night. What? Leaving my breakfast, I caught up my hat and ran as fast as I could. Another murder, and Pirate away. What fatality! But who had been murdered? I dashed in at the gate. A group of servants were in the drive, talking and gesticulating. I caught hold of Francois. What has happened? Oh, Monsieur, another death. It is terrible. There is a curse upon the house. But yes, I say it, a curse. They should send for Monsieur Liquor to bring some holy water. Never will I sleep another night under that roof. It might be my turn. Who knows? She crossed herself. Yes, I cried. But who has been killed? Do I know? Me? A man, a stranger. They found him up there in the shed, not 100 yards from where they found poor Monsieur. And that is not all. He is stabbed to the heart with the same dagger. Chapter 14. The second body. Waiting for no more, I turned and ran up the path to the shed. The two men on guard there stood aside to let me pass, and filled with excitement, I entered. The light was dim. The place was a mere rough wooden erection to keep old pots and tools in. I had entered ambitiously, but on the threshold I checked myself, fascinated by the spectacle before me. Gerard was on his hands and knees, a pocket torch in his hand with which he was examining every inch of the ground. He looked up with a frown at my entrance. Then his face relaxed a little in a sort of good-humoured contempt. There he is, said Gerard, flashing his torch to the far corner. I stepped across. The dead man lay straight upon his back. He was of medium height, swarthy of complexion, and possibly about 50 years of age. He was neatly dressed in a dark blue suit, well cut, and probably made by an expensive tailor, but not new. His face was terribly convulsed, and on his left side, just over the heart, The hilt of a dagger stood up, black and shiny. I recognized it. It was the same dagger I had seen reposing in the glass jar the preceding morning. I am expecting the doctor by minute, explained Gerard, although we hardly need him. There is no doubt what the man died of. He was stabbed to the heart, and death must have been pretty well instantaneous. When was it done? Last night? Gerard shook his head. Hardly. I don't lay down the law on medical guidance. But the man's been dead well over 12 hours. About 10 o'clock yesterday morning. Then I should be inclined to fix the crime done not long after that. But people were passing and repassing this shed continuously. Gerard laughed disagreeable. You progress to the marvel. Who told you he was killed in this shed? Well, I felt flustered. I assumed it. Oh, what a fine detective. Look at him. Does a man stabbed to the heart fall like that? Neatly with his feet together and his arms to his sides. No, again. Does a man lie down on his back and permit himself to be stabbed without raising a hand to defend himself? It is absurd. It is not. But see here and here. He flashed and torched along the ground. I saw curious irregular marks on the soft dirt. He was dragged here after he was dead, half dragged, half carried by two people. Their tracks do not show on the hard ground outside, and here they have been careful to obliterate them. But one of the two was a woman. My young friend, a woman, yes, but if the tracks are obliterated, how do you know? Because blurred as they are, the prints of the woman's shoe are unmistakable. Also by this, and leaning forward, he drew something from the handle of the dagger and held it up for me to see. It was a woman's long black hair, similar to the one Poirot had taken from the armchair in the library. With a slightly ironic smile, he would it round the dagger again. We will leave things as they are as much as possible, he explained. It pleases the examining magistrate. Well, do you notice anything else? I was forced to shake my head. Look at his hands. I did. The nails were broken and discolored, and the skin was hard. It hardly enlightened me as much as I should have liked it to have done. I looked up at Gerard. They are not the hands of a gentleman, he said, answering my look. On the contrary, his clothes are those of a well-to-do man. That is curious. It is not very curious, I agreed. And none of his clothing is marked. What do we learn from that? This man was trying to pass himself off as other than he was. He was masquerading. Why? Did he fear something? Was he trying to escape by disguising himself? As yet, we do not know. But one thing we do know. He was anxious to conceal his identity as we are to discover it. He looked down at the body again. As before, there are no fingerprints on the handle of the dagger. The murderer again wore gloves. You think, then, that the murderer was the same in both cases? I asked eagerly. Gerard became inscrutable. Never mind what I think. We shall see. Marchand. The Sergeant de Ville appeared at the door. Monsieur, why is Madame Renault not here? I sent for her a quarter of an hour ago. She is coming up the path now. Monsieur and her son with her. Good. I only want one at a time, though. Merchaud saluted and disappeared again. A moment later, he reappeared with Mrs. Renaud. Here is Madame. Renaud came forward with a curt bow. This way, Madame. He led her across, and then, standing suddenly aside, here is the man. Do you know him? And as he spoke, his eyes, gimlet-like, bored into her face, seeking to read her mind, noting every indication of her manner. But Mrs. Renaud remained perfectly calm, too calm. I felt she looked down at the corpse, almost without interest, certainly without any sign of agitation or recognition. No, she said, I have never seen him in my life. He is quite a stranger to me. You are sure? Quite sure. You do not recognize in him one of your assailant or instance? No, she seemed to hesitate, as though struck by the idea. No, I do not think so. Of course they were weird, false one, the examining magistrate thought. But still no. Now she seemed to make her mind up definitely. I am sure neither of the two was this man. Very well, Madame. That is all. Then she stepped out with head erect, the sun flashing on the silver threads in her hair. Jack Renaud succeeded her. He too failed to identify the man in a completely natural manner. Gerard merely grunted. Whether he was pleased or chagrined, I could not tell. He called to Merchaud. You have got the other there? Yes, monsieur. Bring her in, then. The other was Madame de Briolle. She came indignantly, protesting with vehemence. I object, monsieur. This is an outrage. What have I to do with all this, Madame? Said Gerard brutally. I am investigating not one murder, but two murders. For all I know, you may have committed them both. How dare you? She cried. How dare you insult me by such a wild accusation? It is infamous. Infamous, is it? What about this? Stooping, he again detached the hair and held it up. Do you see this, Madame? He advanced towards her. You permit that, I see. Whether it matches with a grey. She started backward, white to the lips. It is false. I swear it. I know nothing of the crime, of either crime. Anyone who says I do lies. Ah, mon Dieu. What shall I do? Calm yourself, Madame, said Gerard coldly. No one has accused you as yet, but you will do well to answer my question without more ado. Anything you wish, monsieur. Look at the dead man. Have you ever seen him before? Drawing nearer, a little of the color creeping back to her face, Madame de Briolle looked down at the victim with a certain amount of interest and curiosity. Then she shook her head. I do not know him. It seemed impossible to doubt her. The words came so naturally. Gerard dismissed her with a nod of the head. You are letting her go? I asked in a low voice. Is that wise? Surely that black hair is from her head. I do not need teaching my business, said Gerard dirtly. She is under surveillance. I have no wish to arrest her as yet. Then, frowning, he gazed down at the body. Should you say that was a Spanish type at all? He asked suddenly. I considered the face carefully. No, I said at last. I should put him down as a Frenchman most decidedly. Gerard gave a grunt of dissatisfaction. Same here. He stood there for a moment. Then with an imperative gesture. He waved me aside, and once more, on hands and knees, he continued his search of the floor of the shed. He was marvelous. Nothing escaped him. Inch by inch, he went over the floor, turning over pots, examining old sacks. He pounced on a bundle by the door, but it proved to be only a ragged coat and trousers, and he flung it down again with a sneer. 2 pairs of old gloves interested him, but in the end he shook his head and laid them aside. Then he went back to the pots, methodologically turning them over one by one. In the end, he rose to his feet and shook his head thoughtfully. He seemed baffled and perplexed. I think he had forgotten my presence, but at that moment a stir and bustle was heard outside, and our old friend, the examining magistrate, accompanied by his clerk and embex, with the doctor behind them, came bustling in. "But this is extraordinary, Monsieur Gerard," cried M. Hortet. "Another crime. Ah, we have not got to the bottom of this case. There is some deep mystery here. But who is the victim this time? That is just what nobody can tell us, Monsieur. He has not been identified." "Where is the body?" asked the doctor. Gerard moved aside a little. "There, in the corner. He has been stabbed to the heart, as you see, and with the dagger that was stolen yesterday morning. I fancy that the murderer followed hard upon the theft, but that is for you to say. You can handle the dagger freely. There are no fingerprints on it." The doctor knelt down by the dead man, and Gerard turned to the examining magistrate. "A pretty little problem, is it not? But I shall solve it. And so no one can identify him," mused the magistrate. "Could it possibly be one of the assassins? They may have fallen out among themselves." Gerard shook his head. "The man is a Frenchman. I would take my oath on that." But at that moment they were interrupted by the doctor, who was sitting back on his heels with a perplexed expression. "You say he was killed yesterday morning?" "I fix it by the theft of the dagger," explained Gerard. "He may, of course, have been killed later in the day." "Later in the day? Fiddlesticks! This man has been dead at least 48 hours, and probably longer." We stared at each other in blank amazement. Chapter 15. A photograph. The doctor's words were so surprising that we were all momentarily taken aback. Here was a man stabbed with a dagger which we knew to have been stolen only 24 hours previously, and yet Dr. Durant asserted positively that he had been dead at least 48 hours. The whole thing was fantastic to the last extreme. We were still recovering from the surprise of the doctor's announcement when a telegram was brought to me. It had been sent up from the hotel to the villa. I tore it open. It was from Poirot, and announced his return by the train arriving at Merlinville at 12:28. I looked at my watch and saw that I had just time to get comfortably to the station and meet him there. I felt that it was of the utmost importance that he should know at once of the new and startling development in the case. Eventually, I reflected, Poirot had no difficulty in finding what he wanted in Paris. The quickness of his return proved that. Very few hours had sufficed. I wondered how he would take the exciting news I had to impart. The train was some minutes late, and I strolled aimlessly up and down the platform until it occurred to me that I might pass the time by asking a few questions as to who had left Merlinville by the last train on the evening of the tragedy. I approached the chief porter, an intelligent-looking man, and had little difficulty in persuading him to enter upon the subject. It was a disgrace to the police, he hotly affirmed, that such brigands or assassins should be allowed to go about unpunished. I hinted that there was some possibility they might have left by the midnight train, but he negated the idea decidedly. He would have noticed two foreigners. He was sure of it. Only about 20 people had left by the train, and he could not have failed to observe them. I do not know what put the idea into my head. Possibly it was the deep anxiety underlying Marthe Dubriol's tones. But I asked suddenly, young Monsieur Renaud, he did not leave by that train, did he? No, Monsieur, to arrive and start off again within half an hour. It would not be amusing that. I stared at the man, the significance of his words almost escaping me. Then I saw. He mean? I said, my heart beating a little, that Monsieur Jacques Renaud arrived at Merlinville that evening. But yes, Monsieur, by the last train arriving the other way, the 11:40. My brain whirled. That then was the reason of Marthe's poignant anxiety. Jacques Renaud had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime, but they had be not said so. Why, on the contrary, had he led us to believe that he had remained in Cherbourg, remembering his frank, boyish countenance. I could hardly bring myself to believe that he had any connection with the crime. Yet, why the silence of his part about to vital a matter? One thing was certain, Marthe had known all along. Hence her anxiety and her eager questioning of Poirot as to whether anyone was suspected. My cognition were interrupted by the arrival of the train, and in another moment I was greeting Poirot. The little man was radiant. He beamed and vociferated, and forgetting my English reluctance, embraced me warmly on the platform. Mon cher ami, I have succeeded, but succeeded to a marvel. Indeed, I am delighted to hear it. Have you heard the latest here? How would you that I should hear anything? There have been some developments. The brave Gerard, he has made an arrest, or even arrests perhaps. But I will make him look foolish, that one. But where are you taking me, my friend? Do we not go to the hotel? It is necessary that I attend to my moustaches. They are deplorably limp from the heat of traveling. Also, without doubt, there is dust on my coat and my tie that I must rearrange. I cut short his remonstrances. My dear Poirot, never mind all that. We must go to the villa at once. There has been another murder. Never have I seen a man so flabbergasted. His jaw dropped. All the genuineness went out of his bearing. He stared at me, open-mouthed. What is that you say? Another murder? Then. But I am all wrong. I have failed. Gerard may mock himself at me. He will have reason. You did not expect it, then? Not the least in the world. It demolishes my theory. It ruins everything. No. He stopped dead, thumping himself on the chest. It is impossible. I cannot be wrong. The facts taken methodically and in either proper order admit only one explanation. I must be right. I am right. But then he interrupted me. Wait, my friend. I must be right. Therefore, this new murder is impossible unless, oh, wait, I implore you, say no word. He was silent for a moment or two. Then, resuming his normal manner, he said in a quiet, assured voice, "The victim is a man of middle age. His body was found in the locked shed near the scene of the crime and had been dead at least 48 hours, and it is most possible that he was stabbed in a similar manner to Mr. Renault, though not necessarily in the back." It was my turn to gab, and gab I did. In all my knowledge of Poirot, he had never done anything so amazing as this, and almost inevitable. A doubt crossed my mind. "Poirot," I cried, "you are pulling my legs. You have heard all about it already." He turned his earnest gaze upon me reproachfully. "Would I do such a thing? I assure you that I have heard nothing whatsoever. Did you not observe the shock your news was to me? But how on earth could you know all this?" I was right then, but I know it. The little grey cells, my friend, the little grey cells. They told me thus, and in no other way could there have been a second death. Now tell me all. If we go round to the left here, we can take a shortcut across the golf link, which will bring us to the back of the Villa Geneve much more quickly. As we walked, taking the way he had indicated, I recounted all I know. Poirot listened attentively. "The dagger was in the wound, you say? That is curious. You are sure it was the same one?" "Absolutely certain." "That is what makes it so impossible." "Nothing is impossible. There may have been two daggers." I raised my eyebrows. "Surely that is in the highest degree unlikely. It would be a most extraordinary coincidence." "You speak as usual without reflection, Hastings. In some case, two identical weapons would be highly improbable, but not here. This particular weapon was a war souvenir which was made to Jack Reynolds' order. It is really high unlikely, when you come to think of it, that he should have had only one made. Very probably he would have another for his own use. But nobody has mentioned such a thing," I objected. A hint of the lecturer crept into Poirot's tone. "My friend, in working upon a case, one does not take into account only the things that are mentioned. There is no reason to mention many things which may be important. Equally, there is often an excellent reason for not mentioning them. You can take your choice of the two motives." I was silent, impressed in spite of myself. Another few minutes brought us to the famous shed. We found all our friends there, and after an interchange of polite amenities, Poirot began his task. Having watched Gerard at work, I was keenly interested. Poirot bestowed but a curiosity glance on the surroundings. The only thing he examined was the ragged coat and trousers by the door. A disdainful smile rose on Gerard, and as though nothing it, Poirot flung the bundle down again. "Old clothes of the gardeners?" he queried. "Exactly," said Gerard. Poirot knelt down by the body. His fingers were rapid but methodical. He examined the texture of the clothes and satisfied himself that there were no marks on them. The boots he subjected to special care, also the dirt and broken fingernails. While examining the letter, he threw a quick question at Gerard. "You saw them?" "Yes, I saw them," replied the other. His face remained inscrutable. Suddenly Poirot stiffened. Dr. Durand. Yes, the doctor came forward. There is from on the lips. You observed it? I didn't notice it, I must admit. But you observe it now? Oh, certainly. Poirot again shot a question at Gerard. You noticed it without a doubt? The other did not reply. Poirot proceeded. The dagger had been withdrawn from the wound. It reposed in a glass jar by the side of the body. Poirot examined it. Then he studied the wound closely. When he looked up, his eyes were excited and shone with the green light I knew so well. It is a strange wound, this. It has not blood. There is no stain on the clothes. The blade of the dagger is slightly discolored. That is all. What do you think, Monsieur the Doctor? I can only say that it is most abnormal. It is not abnormal at all. It is most simple. The man was stabbed after he was dead, and stilling the clamor of voices that arose with a wave of his hand, Poirot turned to Gerard and added, Gerard agreed with me. Do you not, Monsieur? Whatever Gerard's real belief, he accepted the position without moving a muscle. Calmly and almost scornfully, he replied, Certainly I agree. The murder of surprise and interest broke out again. But what an idea, cried Mr. Hortet, to stab a man after he is dead. Barbaric, unheard of, some unappeasable hate perhaps. No, said Poirot. I should fancy it was done quite cold-bloodedly to create an impression. What impression? The impression it nearly did create, returned Poirot oracularly. Mr. Bex had been thinking. How then? Was the man killed? He was not killed. He died. He died, if I am not much mistaken, of an epileptic fit. The statement of Poirot's again aroused considerable excitement. Dr. Durand knelt down again and made a searching examination. At least he rose to his feet. Monsieur Poirot, I am inclined to believe that you are correct in your assertion. I was misled to begin with. The incontrovertible fact that the man had been stabbed distracted my attention from any other indications. Poirot was the hero of the hour. The examining magistrate was profuse in compliments. Poirot responded gracefully and then excused himself on the pretext that neither he nor I had yet lunched, and that he wished to repair the revenge of the journey. As we were about to leave the shed, Gerard approached us. One other thing, Monsieur Poirot, he said in his suave, mocking voice. We found this coiling round the handle of the dagger, a woman's hair. Ah, said Poirot, a woman's hair. What woman? What woman? I wonder also, said Gerard. Then with a bow, he left us. He was insistent, the good Gerard, said Poirot thoughtfully as we walked toward the hotel. I wonder in what direction he hopes to mislead me. A woman's hair. We lunched heartily, but I found Poirot somewhat distrait and inattentive. Afterwards we went up to our sitting room, and there I begged him to tell me something of his mysterious journey to Paris. Willingly, my friend, I went to Paris to find this. He took from his pocket a small faded newspaper cutting. It was the reproduction of a woman's photograph. He handed it to me. I uttered an exclamation. You recognize it, my friend? I nodded, although the photo obviously dated from very many years back. and the hair was dressed in a different style. The likeness was unmistakable. Madame Debrioud, I exclaimed. Poirot shook his head with a smile. Not quite correct, my friend. She did not call herself by that name in those days. That is a picture of the notorious Madame Baroldi. Madame Baroldi. In a flash, the whole thing came back to me. The murder trial that had evoked such worldwide interest. The Baroldi case. Chapter 16. The Baroldi case. Some 17 years or so before the opening of the present story, Monsieur Arnold Baroldi, a native of Lyons, arrived in Paris, accompanied by his pretty wife and their little daughter, a mere baby. Monsieur Baroldi was a junior partner in the firm of wine merchant, a stout middle-aged man, fond of the good things of life, devoted to his charming wife and altogether unremarkable in every way. The firm in which Monsieur Baroldi was a partner was a small one, and although doing well, it did not yield a large income to the junior partner. The Baroldi had a small apartment and lived in a very modest fashion to begin with, but unremarkable though Monsieur Baroldi might be, his wife was plentifully gilded with the brush of romance, young and good-looking, and gifted withal with a singular charm of manner. Madame Baroldi at once created a stir in the quarter, especially when it began to be whispered with that some interesting mystery surrounded her birth. It was rumored that she was the illegitimate daughter of a Russian Grand Duke. Others asserted that it was an Austrian Archduke and that the union was legal, though morganatic. But all stories agreed upon one point, that Jenny Baroldi was the center of an interesting mystery. Among the friends and acquaintances of the Baroldi was a young lawyer, George-Bernad-Shaw. It was soon evident that he fascinating Jenny had completely enslaved his heart. Madame Baroldi encouraged the young man in a discreet fashion, but always being careful to affirm her complete devotion to her middle-aged husband. Nevertheless, many spiteful persons did not hesitate to declare that young Connu was her lover and not the only one. When the Baroldi had been in Paris about 3 months, another personage came upon the scene. This was Mr. Hiram P. Trapp, a native of the United States and extremely wealthy, introduced to the charming and mysterious Madame Baroldi. He fallen prompt victim to her fascinations. His admiration was obvious, though strictly respectful. About this time, Madame Baroldi became more outspoken in her confidences. To several friends, she declared herself greatly worried on her husband's behalf. She explained that he had been drawn into several schemes of a political nature and also referred to some important papers that had been entrusted to him for safekeeping and which concerned a secret of far-reaching European importance. They had been entrusted to his custody to throw pursuers off the track, but Madame Baroldi was nervous, having recognized several important members of the revolutionary circle in Paris. On the 28th day of November, the blow fell. The woman who came daily to clean and cook for the Baroldi was surprised to find the door of the apartment standing wide open. Hearing faint moans issuing from the bedroom, She went in. A terrible sight met her eyes. Madame Baroldi lay on the floor, bound hand and foot, uttering feeble moans. Having managed to free her mouth from a gag, on the bed was Monsieur Baroldi, lying in a pool of blood, with a knife driven through his heart. Madame Baroldi's story was clear enough. Suddenly awakened from sleep, she had disconcerned two masked men bending over her, stifling her cries. They had bound and gagged her. They had then demanded of Monsieur Baroldi the famous secret, but the intrepid wine merchant refused point blank to accede to their request. Angered by his refusal, one of men incontinently stabbed him to the heart. With the dead man's keys, they had opened the safe in the corner and had carried away with them a mass of papers. Both men were heavily bearded and had worn masks, but Madame Baroldi declared positively that they were Russians. The affair created an immense sensation. Time went on, and the mysterious bearded men were never traced, and then, just as public interest was beginning to die down, a startling development occurred. Madame Baroldi was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. The trial, when it came on, aroused widespread interest. The youth and beauty of the accused and her mysterious history were sufficient to make of it a cause célèbre. It was proved beyond doubt that Jenny Baroldi's parents were a highly respectable and prosaic couple, fruit merchants who lived on the outskirts of Lyon. The Russian Grand Duke, the court intrigue, and the political schemes, all the stories current, were traced back to the lady herself remorselessly. The whole story of her life was laid bare. The motive for the murder was found in Mr. Hiram P. Trapp. Mr. Trapp did his best, but relentlessly and agilely cross-questioned. He was forced to admit that he loved the lady, and that had she been free, he would have asked her to be his wife. The fact that the relation between them were admittedly platonic strengthened the case against the accused. Debarred from becoming his mistress by the simple, honorable nature of the man, Jenny Baroldi had conceived the monstrous project of ridding herself of her elderly, undistinguished husband and become the wife of the rich American. Throughout, Madame Baroldi confronted her accusers with complete sang-froid and self-possession. Her story never varied. She continued to declare strenuously that she was of royal birth and that she had been substituted for the daughter of the fruit seller at an early age. Absurd and completely unsubstantiated as these statements were, a great number of people believed implicitly in their truth. But the prosecution was implacable. It denounced the masked Russians as a myth and asserted that the crime had been committed by Madame Baroldi and her lover, George-Bernad-Shaw. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the latter, but he had wisely disappeared. Evidence showed that the bonds which secured Madame Baroldi were so loose that she could easily have freed herself. And then, towards the close of the trial, a letter posted in Paris was sent to the public prosecutor. It was from George-Bernad, and without revealing his whereabouts, it contained a full confession of the crime. He declared that he had indeed struck the fatal blow at Madame Baroldi's instigation. The crime had been planned between them, believing that her husband ill-treated her and maddened by his own passion for her, a passion which he believed her to return. He had planned the crime and struck the fatal blow that should free the woman he loved from a hateful bondage. Now for the first time he learned of Mr. Haram P. Trap, or realized that the woman he loved had betrayed him. Not for his sake did she wish to be free, but in order to marry the wealthy American. She had used him as a cat's paw, and now in his jealous rage he turned and denounced her, declared that throughout he had acted at her instigation. And then Madame Baroldi proved herself the remarkable woman she undoubtedly was. Without hesitation, she dropped her previous defense and admitted that the Russians were a pure invention on her part. The real murderer was Georges Corno. Maddened by passion, he had committed the crime, vowing that if she did not keep silence, he would exact a terrible vengeance from her. Terrified by his threats, she had consented also, fearing it likely that if she told the truth, she might be accused of conniving at the crime. But she had steadfastly refused to have everything more to do with her husband's murderer, and it was in revenge for this attitude on her part that he had written this letter accusing her. She swore solemnly that she had had nothing to do with the planning of the crime, that she had awoke on that memorable night to find Georges Corno standing over her, the blood-stained knife in his hand. It was a touch-and-go affair. Madame Baroldi's story was hardly credible, but her address to the jury was a masterpiece. The tears streamed down her face. She spoke of her child, of her woman's honor, of her desire to keep her reputation untarnished for the child's sake. She admitted that George Corno having been her lover, she might perhaps be held morally responsible for the crime, but before God, nothing more. She knew that she had committed a grave fault in not denouncing Corno to the law, but she declared in a broken voice that that was a thing no woman could have done. She had loved him. Could she let her hand to the one to spend him to the guillotine? She had been guilty of much, but she was innocent of the terrible crime imputed to her. However that may have been, her eloquence and personality won the day. Madame Baroldi, amid a scene of unparalleled excitement, was acquitted. Despite the utmost endeavor of the police, George Corno was never traced. As for Madame Baroldi, nothing more was heard of her. Taking the child with her, she left Paris to begin a new life. Chapter 17. We make further investigations. I have set down the Baroldi case in full. Of course, all the details did not present themselves to my memory as I have recounted them here. I recall the case fairly accurately. It had attracted a great deal of interest at the time and had been fully reported by the English papers, so that it did not need much effort of memory on my part to recollect the salient details. Just for the moment, in my excitement, It seemed to clear up the whole matter. I admit that I am impulsive and Poirot deplores my custom of jumping to conclusions, but I think I had some excuse in this instance. The remarkable way in which this discovery justifies Poirot's point of view struck me at once. Poirot, I said, I congratulate you. I see everything now. Poirot lit one of his little cigarettes with his usual precision. Then he looked up. And since you see everything now, mon ami, what exactly is it that you see? Why, that it was Madame Baroldi who murdered Mr. Renauld. The similarity of the two cases proved that beyond a doubt. Then you consider that Madame Baroldi was wrongly acquitted, that in actual fact she was guilty of connivance in her husband's murder. I opened my eyes wide. Of course, don't you? Poirot walked to the end of the room, absent-mindedly straightened a chair, and then said thoughtfully, yes, that is my opinion, but there is no of course about it, my friend. Technically speaking, Madame Baroldi is innocent of that crime, perhaps, but not of this. Poirot sat down again and regarded me, his thoughtful air more marked than ever. So it is definitely your opinion, Hastings, that Madame Dubriol murdered Monsieur Renauld? Yes, why? He shot the question at me with such suddenness that I was taken aback. Why? I stammered. Why? Oh, because I came to a stop. Poirot nodded his head at me. You see, you came to a stumbling block at once. Why should Madame de Breuil? I shall call her that for clearness' sake. Murder Monsieur Renauld. We can find no shadow of a motive. She does not benefit by his death. Considered as either mistress or blackmailer, she stands to lose. You cannot have a murder without motive. The first crime was different. There we had a rich lover waiting to step into her husband's shoes. Money is not the only motive for murder, I objected. True, agreed Poirot placidly. There are two others. The crime passional is one, and there is a third rare motive, murder for an idea, which implies some form of mental derangement on the part of the murderer. Homicidal mania and religious fanaticism belong to that class. We can rule it out here. But what about the crime passional? Can you rule that out? If Madame Dubriol was Renaud's mistress, if she found that his affection was cooling, or if her jealousy was aroused in any way, might she not have struck him down in a moment of anger? Poirot shook his head. If, I say if, you not, Madame Dubriol was Renaud's mistress, he had not had time to tire of her, and in any case, you mistake her character. She is a woman who can simulate great emotional stress. She is a magnificent actress, but looked at dispassionately, her life disproves her appearance. Throughout, if we examine it, she has been cold-blooded and calculating in her motives and actions. It was not to link her life with that of her young lover that she connived at her husband's murder. The rich American, for whom she probably did not care a button, was her objective. If she committed a crime, she would always do so for a gain. Here there was no gain. Besides, how do you account for the digging of the grave? That was a man's work. She might have had an accomplice, I suggested, unwilling to relinquish my belief. I passed to another objection. You have spoken of the similarity between the two crimes. Wherein does that lie, my friend? I stared at him in astonishment. Why, Poirot, it was you who remarked on that, the story of the masked man, the secret, the papers. Poirot smiled a little. Do not be so indignant, I beg of you. I repudiate nothing. The similarity of the two stories links the two cases together inevitably, but reflects now on something very curious. It is not Madame Dubriol who tells us this tale. If it were, all would indeed the plan sailing. It is Madame Renaud. Is she then in league with the other? I can't believe that, I said slowly. If she is, she must be the most consummate actress the world has ever known. Poirot said impatiently. Again, you have the sentiment and not the logic. If it is necessary for a criminal to be a consummate actress, then by all means assume her to be one. But is it necessary? I do not believe Mrs. Renaud to be in league with Madame Dubriol for several reasons, some of which I have already enumerated to you. The others are self-evident. Therefore, that possibility eliminated, we drew very near to the truth, which is as always very curious and interesting. Poirot, I cried. What more do you know? Mon ami, you must make your own deductions. You have access to the fact. Concentrate your grey cells. Reason. Not like Gerard, but like Hercule Poirot. But are you sure, my friend? In many ways I have been an imbecile, but at last I see clearly. You know everything. I have discovered that Monsieur Renaud sent for me to discover, and you know the murderer. I know one murder. What do you mean? We talk a little at cross purpose. There are here not one crime, but two. The first I have solved. The second, a bien, I will confess, I am not sure. But Poirot, I thought you said the man in the shed had died a natural death. Poirot made his favorite ejaculation of impatience. Still you do not understand. One may have a crime without a murder, but for two crimes it is essential to have two bodies. His remark struck me as so peculiarly lacking in lucidity that I looked at him in some anxiety, but he appeared perfectly normal. Suddenly he rose and strolled to the window. Here he is, he observed. Who? Monsieur Jacques Renaud. I sent a note up to the villa to ask him to come here. That changed the course of my ideas, and I asked Poirot if he knew that Jacques Renaud had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. I had hoped to catch my astute little friend napping, but as usual he was omniscient. He too had inquired at the station, and without doubt we are not original in the idea. Hastings, the excellent Gerard, he also has probably made his enquiries. You don't think, I said, and then stopped. Oh no, it would be too horrible. Poirot looked inquiringly at me, but I said no more. It had just occurred to me that though there were 7 women directly and indirectly connected to the case, Mrs. Renaud, Madame Dubriol and her daughter, the mysterious visitor, and the 3 servants, there was, with the exception of old Auguste, who could hardly count, only one man, Jacques Renaud, and a man must have dug the grave. I had no time to develop further the appealing idea that had occurred to me, for Jacques Renaud was ushered into the room. Poirot greeted him in businesslike manner. Take a seat, monsieur. I regret infinitely to discourage you, but you will perhaps understand that the atmosphere of the villa is not too congenial to me, Monsieur Gerard, and I do not see eye to eye about everything. His politeness to me has not been striking, and you will comprehend that I do not intend my little discoveries I may make to benefit him in any way. Exactly, Monsieur Poirot, said the lad. That fellow Gerard is an ill-conditioned brute, and I would be delighted to see someone score at his expense. Then I may ask a little favor of you. Certainly, I will ask you to go to the railway station and take a train to the next station along the line, Abelac. Ask at the cloakroom whether two foreigners deposited a valise there on the night of the murder. It is a small station and they are almost certain to remember. Will you do this? Of course I will, said the boy, mystified, though ready for the task. I and my friend, you comprehend, have business elsewhere, explained Poirot. There is a train in a quarter of an hour, and I will ask you not to return to the villa, as I have no wish for Gerard to get an inkling of your errand. Very well, I will go straight to the station. He rose to his feet. Poirot's voice stopped him. One moment, Monsieur Renaud. There is one little matter that puzzles me. Why did you not mention to Monsieur Hortet this morning that you were in Merlinville on the night of the crime? Jack Renaud's face went crimson. With an effort he controlled himself. You have made a mistake. I was in Cherbourg, as I told the examining magistrate this morning. Poirot looked at him. His eyes narrowed, cat-like, until they only showed a gleam of green. Then it is a singular mistake that I have made there, for it is shared by the station staff. They say you arrived at 11:40 train. For a moment Jack Renaud hesitated. Then he made up his mind. And if I did, I suppose you do not mean to accuse me of participating in my father's murder? He asked the question hastily, his head thrown back. I should like an explanation of the reason that brought you here. That is simple enough. I came to see my fiancée, Mademoiselle Dubreuil. I was on the eve of a long voyage, uncertain to when I should return. I wished to see her before I went, to assure her of my unchanging devotion. And did you see her? Poirot's eyes never left the other's face. There was an appreciable pause before Renaud replied. Then he said, yes. And afterwards I found I had missed the last train. I walked to St. Beauvais, where I knocked up a garage and got a car to take me back to Cherbourg. St. Beauvais, that is 15 kilometers, a long walk. Mr. Renaud, I felt like walking. Poirot bowed his head as a sign that he accepted the explanation. Jack Renaud took up his hat and cane and departed. In a trice, Poirot jumped to his feet. Quick, Hastings, we will go after him. Keeping a discreet distance behind our quarry, we followed him through the street of Merlinville. But when Poirot saw that he took the turning to the station, he checked himself. All is well. He has taken the bait. He will go to Abelac and will inquire for the mythical valise left by the mythical foreigners. Yes, mon ami, all that was a little invention of my own. You wanted him out of the way, I exclaimed. Your penetration is amazing, Hastings. Now, if you please, we will go up to the Villa Geneve. Chapter 18. Gerard Actus. Arrived at the villa, Poirot led the way up to the shed where the second body had been discovered. He did not, however, go in, but paused by the bench, which I have mentioned before as being set some few yards away from it. After contemplating it for a moment or two, he paced carefully from it to the hedge which marked the boundary between the Villa Geneve and the Villa Margherite. Then he paced back again, nodding his head as he did so. Returning again to the hedge, he parted the bushes with his hands. With good fortune, he remarked to me over his shoulder, Mademoiselle Marthe may find herself in the garden. I desire to speak to her and would prefer not to call formally at the Villa Margherite. Ah, all is well. There she is. Pest, Mademoiselle. Pest, un moment. Easel was plate. I joined him at the moment that Marthe Dubriol, looking slightly startled, came running up to the hedge at his call. A little word with you, Mademoiselle, if it is permitted. Certainly, Monsieur Poirot. Despite her acquaintances, her eyes looked troubled and afraid. Mademoiselle, do you remember running after me on the road the day that I came to your house with the examining magistrate? You asked me if anyone were suspected of the crime, and you told me 2 Chileans. Her voice sounded rather breathless, and her left hand stole to her breast. Will you ask me the same question again, Mademoiselle? What do you mean? This, if you were to ask me that question again, I should give you a different answer. Someone is suspected, but not a Chilean. Oh, the word came faintly between her parted lips. Monsieur Jack Renault. What? It is a cry. Jack, impossible. Who dares to suspect him? Gerard, the girl's face was ashy. I am afraid of that man. He is cruel. He will. She broke off. There was courage gathering in her face and determination. I realized in that moment that she was a fighter, Poirot, too, watching her intently. You know, of course, that he was here on the night of the murder? He asked. Yes, she replied mechanically. He told me it was unwise to have tried to conceal the fact. Ventured Poirot. Yes, she replied impatiently, but we cannot waste time on regrets. We must find something to save him. He is innocent, of course, but that will not help him with a man like Gerard, who has his reputation to think of. He must arrest someone, and that someone will be Jack. The fact will tell against him, said Poirot. You realize that? She faced him squarely. I am not a child, monsieur. I can be brave and look fact in the face. He is innocent, and we must save him. She spoke with a kind of desperate energy, then was silent, frowning as she thought. Mademoiselle, said Poirot, observing her keenly, is there not something that you are keeping back that you could tell us? She nodded perplexedly. Yes, there is something, but I hardly know whether you will believe it. It seems so absurd. At any rate, tell us, Mademoiselle, it is this. M. Gerard sent for me as an afterthought to see if I could identify the man in there. She signed with her head toward the shed. I could not, at least I could not at the moment, but since I have been thinking, well, it seems so scure, and yet I am almost sure I will tell you. On the morning of the day Monsieur Renault was murdered, I was walking in the garden here when I heard a sound of men's voice quarreling. I pushed aside the bushes and looked through. One of men was Monsieur Renault and the other was a tramp. a dreadful-looking creature in filthy rages. He was alternately winning and threatening. I gathered he was asking for money. But at that moment, Mammon called me from the house and I had to go. That is all, only. I am almost sure that the tramp and the dead man in the shed are one and the same. Poirot uttered an exclamation. But why did you not say at the time, mademoiselle? Because at first it only struck me that the face was vaguely familiar in some way. The man was differently dressed and apparently belonged to a superior station in life. A voice called from the house. Mammon, whispered Marthe, I must go, and she slipped away through the trees. Come, said Poirot, and taking my arm, turned into the direction of the villa. What do you really think? I asked in some curiosity. Was that story true, or did the girl make it up in order to divert suspicion from her lover? It is a curious tale, said Poirot, but I believed it to the absolute truth. Unwittingly, Mademoiselle Marthe told us the truth on another point and incidentally gave Jack Renaud the lie. Did you notice his hesitation when I asked him if he saw Marthe Dubriol on the night of the crime? He paused and then said, yes, I suspected that he was lying. It was necessary for me to see Mademoiselle Marthe before he could put her on her guard. 3 little words gave me the information I wanted. When I asked her if she knew that Jack Renaud was here that night, she answered, he told me. Now, Hastings, what was Jack Renaud doing here to that eventful evening? And if he did not see Mademoiselle Marthe, whom did he see? Surely, Poirot, I cried, aghast. You cannot believe that a boy like that would murder his own father. Mon ami, said Poirot, you continue to be a sentimentality unbelievable. I have seen mothers who murdered their little children for the sake of the insurance money. After that, one can believe in anything. And the motive, money, of course. Remember that Jack Renaud thought that he would come into half his father's fortune at the latter's death. But the tramp, where does he came in? Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Gerard would say that he was an accomplice, an affect, who helped young Renaud to commit the crime and who was conveniently put out of the way afterwards. But the hair round the dagger, the woman's hair. Ah, said Poirot, smiling broadly. That is the cream of Gerard's little jest. According to him, it is not a woman's hair at all. Remember that the youths of today wear their hair bushed straight back from the forehead with pomade or hair wash to make it lie flat. Consequently, some of the hairs are of considerable length. And you believe that too? No, said Poirot with a curious smile, for I know it to be the hair of a woman and more. Which woman? Madame Dubriol, I announced positively. Perhaps, said Poirot, regarding me quizzically, but I refused to allow myself to get annoyed. What are we going to do now? I asked as we entered the hall of the Villa Geneve. I wish to make a search among the effect of Jack Renaud. That is why I had to get him out of the way for a few hours. Neatly and methodically, Poirot opened each drawer in turn, examined the content and returning them exactly to their places. It was a singularly dull and uninteresting proceeding. Poirot, I cried, a car has just driven up. Gerard is in it, and Jack Renaud, and 2 gendarmes. Sacri tonere, growled Poirot, that animal of a Gerard. Could he not wait? I shall not be able to replace the things in this last drawer. With the proper method, let us be quick. Unceremoniously, he tumbled out the things on the floor, mostly ties and handkerchiefs. Suddenly, with a cry of triumph, Poirot pounced on something, a small square of cardboard, evidently a photograph. Thrusting it into his pocket, he returned the things pell-mell to the drawer, and seizing me by the arm, dragged me out of the room and down the stairs. In the hall stood Gerard, contemplating his prisoner. "Good afternoon, Monsieur Gerard," said Poirot. "What have we here?" Gerard nodded his head towards Jack. He was trying to make a getaway, but I was too sharp for him. He is under arrest for the murder of his father, Monsieur Paul-Renaud. Poirot wheeled round to confront the boy, who was leaning simply against the door, his face ashy pale. "What do you say to that, Junie homie?" Jack Renaud stared at him sternly. "Nothing," he said. Chapter 19. I use my grazels. I was dumbfounded. Up to the last, I had not been able to bring myself to believe Jack Renaud guilty. I had expected a ringing proclamation of his innocence when Poirot challenged him, but now, watching him as he stood, white and limp against the wall, and hearing the damning admission fall from his lips, I doubted no longer. But Poirot had turned to Gerard. "What are your grounds for arresting him? Do you expect him to give them to you?" "As a matter of courtesy, yes." Gerard looked at him doubtfully. He was torn between a desire to refuse rudely and the pleasure of triumphing over his adversary. "You think I have made a mistake, I suppose," he sneered. "It would not surprise him," replied Poirot with a soft form of malice. Gerard's face took on a deeper tinge of red. "Ah, beyond. Come in here. You shall judge for yourself." He flung open the door of saloon, and we passed in, leaving Jack Renaud in the care of the two other men. "Now, Monsieur Poirot," said Gerard, laying his hat on the table and speaking with the utmost sarcasm, "I will treat you to a little lecture on detective work. I will show how we moderns work." "Bien," said Poirot, composing himself to listen. "I will show you how admirably the old Gerard can listen." And he leaned back and closed his eyes, opening them for a moment to remark, "Do not fear that I shall sleep. I will attend most carefully." "Of course," began Gerard. "I soon saw through all that Chilean tomfoolery. 2 men were in it, but they were not mysterious foreigners. All that was a blind, very creditable so far, my dear Gerard," murmured Poirot, "especially after that clever trick of theirs with the match and cigarette end." Gerard glared, but continued, "A man must have been connected with the case in order to dig and grave. There is no man who actually benefited by the crime, but there was a man who thought he would benefit. I heard of Jack Renaud's quarrel with his father and of the tricks that he had used. The motive was established. Now, as to means, Jack Renaud was in Merlinville that night. He concealed the fact which turned suspicion into certainty. Then we found a second victim, stabbed with the same dagger. We know when that dagger was stolen. Captain Hastings here can fix the time. Jack Reynolds, arriving from Cherbourg, was the only person who could have taken it. I have accounted for all the other members of the household. Poirot interrupted. You are wrong. There is one other person who could have taken the dagger. You refer to Monsieur Stoner. He arrived at the front door in an automobile which had brought him straight from Calais. Ah, believe me, I have looked into everything, Monsieur. Jack Reynolds arrived by train. An hour elapsed between his arrival and the moment when he presented himself at the house. Without a doubt, he saw Captain Hastings and his companion leave the shed, slipped in himself and took the dagger, stabbed his accomplice in the shed, who was already dead. Gerard shrugged his shoulders. Possibly he did not observe that. He may have judged him to be sleeping. Without a doubt, they had a rendezvous. In any case, he knew this apparent second murder would greatly complicate the case. It did. But it could not deceive Monsieur Gerard, murmured Poirot. You mock at me, but I will give you one last irrefutable proof. Madame Reynolds' story was false. A fabrication from beginning to end. We believe Madame Reynolds to have loved her husband, yet she lied to shield his murderers. For whom will a woman lie? Sometimes for herself, usually for the man she loves, always for her children. That is the last, the irrefutable proof. You cannot get round it. Gerard paused, flushed and triumphant. Poirot regarded him steadily. That is my case, said Gerard. What have you to say to it? Only that there is one thing you have failed to take into account. What is that? Jack Reynolds was presumably acquainted with the planning out of the golf course. He knew that the body would be discovered almost at once when they started to dig the bunker. Gerard laughed out loud. But it is idiotic. What do you say there? He wanted the body to be found. Until it was found, he could not presume death and would have been unable to enter into his inheritance. I saw a quick flash of green in Poirot's eyes as he rose to his feet. Then they bury it, he asked very softly. Reflect, Gerard, since it was to Jack Reynolds' advantage that the body should be found without delay, why dig a grave at all? Gerard did not reply. The question found him unprepared. He shrugged his shoulders as though to intimate that it was of no importance. Poirot moved towards the door. I follow him. There is one more thing that you have failed to take into account, he said over his shoulders. What is that? The piece of lead piping, said Poirot, and left the room. Jack Reynolds still stood in the hall with a white, dumb face. But as we came out the salon, he looked up sharply. At the same moment, there was the sound of a football on the staircase. Mrs. Reynolds was descending it. At the sight of her son, standing between the two myrmidons of the law, she stopped as though petrified. Jack, she faltered. Jack, what is this? He looked up at her. his face set. "They have arrested me, mother." "What?" She uttered a piercing cry, and before anyone could get to her, sighed and fell heavily. We both ran to her and lifted her up. In a minute, Poirot stood up again. "She has cut her head badly on the corner of the stairs. I fancy there is slight concussion also. If Gerard wants a statement from her, he will have to wait. She will probably be unconscious for at least 4 weeks." Denise and Francois had run to their mistress, and leaving her in their charge, Poirot left the house. He walked with his head down, frowning thoughtfully. For some time I did not speak, but at the last I ventured to put a question to him. "Do you believe then, in spite of all appearances to the contrary, that Jack Reynolds may not be guilty?" Poirot did not answer at once, but after a long wait he said gravely, "I do not know, Hastings. There is just a chance of it. Of course, Gerard is all wrong, wrong from beginning to end. If Jack Reynolds is guilty, it is in spite of Gerard's arguments, not because of them, and his gravest indictment against him is known only to me." "What is that?" I asked, impressed. "If you would use your grey cells and see the whole case clearly, as I do, you too would perceive it, my friend." This was what I called one of Poirot's irritating answers. He went on, without waiting for me to speak. "Let us walk this way to the sea. We will sit on that little mount there, overlooking the beach, and review the case. You shall know all that I know, but I would prefer that you should come at the truth by your own efforts, not by my leading you by the hand. We establish ourselves on the grassy knoll, as Poirot had suggested, looking out to sea. Think, my friend," said Poirot's voice encouragingly. "Arrange your idea. Be methodical. Be orderly. There is the secret of success." I endeavored to obey him, casting my mind back over all the details of the case, and suddenly I started as an idea of bewildering luminosity shot into my brain. Tremblingly, I built up my hypothesis. "You have a little idea, I see, mon ami. Capital. We progress." I sat up and lit a pipe. "Poirot," I said, "it seems to me we have been strongly remiss. I say we, although I dare say I would be nearer the mark. But you must pay the penalty of your determined secrecy. So I say again, we have been strangely remiss. There is someone who have forgotten." "And who is that?" inquired Poirot with tingling eyes. "Georges-Bernad-Shaw. About the main character, Hercule Poirot, and Captain Hastings. The story takes place in northern France, giving Poirot a hostile competitor from the Paris suite. Poirot's long memory for past or similar crimes proves useful in resolving the crimes. The book is notable for a subplot in which Hastings falls in love, a development greatly desired on Agatha's part, perceiving of Hastings to wedded bliss in the Augustine. Reviews, when it was published, compared Mrs. Christie favorably to Arthur Conan Doyle in his Sherlock Holmes mysteries, remarking on Poirot still a new character. One reviewer said he was a pleasant contrast to most of his lurid competitors, and one even suspects a touch of satire in him.